moderator in this room. And we are all here to see, we're all here to see Sofia Segura do their presentation on Mexican American women's views on depression, thoughts, implications, and outcomes. Their mentor, Dr. Melissa Velez, is here as well, and we'll say words about Sofia afterwards. And the way this is going to work is we'll have Sofia present for about 16 minutes, and there'll be time for Q&A afterwards. So please come with your questions, your feedback, your thoughts that you want to share. And then you'll get to see Dr. Velez give Sofia the cord and stole and officially become an honors. He's not officially graduated yet, but you know, on the way. Almost there. So let's give Sofia a hand and we'll
Thank you guys for that introduction. As you said, my thesis presentation is called Mexican American Women's Views on Depression and Patients' Outcomes. My name is Sofia Segura, and my advisor for my project is Dr. Melissa Velez. In examining depression in women, we first examine the historical perspective as it impacts how we currently view mental health in women and the disparaging effects that women have faced in mental health. There has been historical reporting of women often being dismissed in healthcare. Additionally, hysteria was one of the first mental disorders defined, and it dates back to the ancient Egyptians. Even in the 20th century, women were still being diagnosed with hysteria, and it painted women who often didn't conform to cultural norms as hysteric. The DSM-5 is the current handbook for clinicians to make diagnoses, and it has very gendered language, which often leads to an overdiagnosis in women for certain mental health disorders. For example, borderline and histrionic personality disorder are most commonly diagnosed in women, despite that in reality there is an equal prevalence rate of both men and women. I recognize that mental health has marginalized women overall as a population. However, there has been a larger history of marginalization for women of color and especially Latino women. Despite these higher rates of depression in Latino women, we see that a lot of research has focused on the experiences of depression in white women. We also recognize that this group of Latino women is a very heterogeneous group filled with women of many different ethnic backgrounds, immigration history, colonization history, and so many other factors. Because of that, it is important to zoom in and examine how depression may look for a particular ethnic group to be able to best serve each community and individualized treatment for and cultural adaptations for more homogeneous groups such as Mexican American women. So moving into the current study, this is what I have been personally working on. So the study goals for my study, I wanted to understand the factors related to depression in Mexican American women and also amplify the voices of Mexican American women who may have experienced depression in their lives. So for the data collection for my survey, the pre-screening and eligibility, I wanted to personally interview women who are students of St. Edward's University who identify as Mexican American, who have either personally dealt with depression in their lives or have a close relationship, such as a friend or a family member who is also a Mexican American woman who has dealt with depression themselves, or a combination of both, and are comfortable participating in the study in English. So for some participant demographics, I have 5 participants, both Mexican and Mexican American women. The average age was around 23 years old. And for nativity, one of the participants was born in Mexico, so she is a first-generation immigrant. One was born in the U.S. with Mexico-born parents, so she is a second-generation immigrant. And 3 were born in the U.S. with U.S.-born parents, but Mexican-born grandparents, so they would be third generation. So to analyze the data, we use thematic analysis, and that includes first identifying the themes that are present in the data. With those themes present, we analyze all those possible codes. And then within those codes, you identify common themes, while also making sure to always capturing all of the codes while retaining participants' original wording and intent. So the two colors is me and another Mexican-American woman, both second-generation immigrants, which again means we were born in the U.S. to Mexico-born parents. And it was an iterative process due to our cultural backgrounds and experiences. So it was important for us to discuss the cultural meanings and relevance that we have noticed personally, both in research and our own communities. So the research question that came up was, what are the factors that impact depression for Mexican Americans? So moving into the results of the study and the interviews, as we reviewed the transcripts of the interviews, we found that there were two main clusters of factors that contributed to mental health in Mexican American women. These can be captured by both negative contributors and positive influences. Each of these factors had sub-themes within the categories, and then those sub-themes also had sub-themes themselves. And we are going to walk through each of these main factors using quotes from participant interviews. So we are going to first start with the discussion of the negative contributors. These are the factors that exacerbated Mexican American women's depression and negatively impacted their symptoms. So we noticed three main types of negative contributors. Both negative stigma/views and family obligations and roles have different sub-themes, as you can see here. We are going to start with first discussing negative stigma/views. Okay, and as I mentioned, this theme had various sub-themes emerged. So here we see familial stigma, cultural stigma, peer stigma, and self-stigma. So for familial stigma, we're going to be, as you can see here, a first-generation Mexican-American woman discusses talking about depression with her father. And here it says, "You're so dramatic, you don't have anything, you just want to call for attention." And so we see familial stigma here coming from her father. When trying to discuss depression with him, he is not very receptive to it. That stigma from him. Next, we will discuss the cultural stigma. Here we have a second-generation Mexican-American woman talking about bringing up depression with her Mexican-American family and peers. She says, I didn't know who to talk to about that. And it's not really talked about in the Latin community. And she was nervous that people are going to be like, what do you have? So here we see her having fear about facing that cultural stigma because, as she mentioned, it's not talked about very often. So she was nervous to bring it up due to the fear of facing that stigma from people of her same cultural background. Here we have peer stigma. A Mexican-American woman discusses peers masking their depression. She says the masking phase of depression where it's like, oh no, I'm fine. She said this is where I generally only see that masking type of behavior. So instead of being open to discussing depression with their Mexican-American peers, people often decide to just mask that depression to avoid those conversations that may be hard or are also, kind of scary to discuss. And self-stigma is stigma imposed onto one's own self due to negative views on mental health that they may have internalized. For difficulty sharing mental health with others, Mexican-American women may have difficulty sharing information about their own mental health with others due to many different factors, but for fear or uncertainty of the reaction they may face can often be a main factor. And now we will get into discussing the family obligations and roles of the contributor. Here we see that this sub-theme had more sub-themes itself. So we see the role of the parents, the role of the eldest daughter, the role of grandparents, and then also the cultural value of familism and respect. So here we see the role of eldest daughter. There are a lot of obligations that come from being an eldest daughter. Other participants mentioned how having to take care of their family, but also completing tasks for school and having multiple responsibilities contributed to their symptoms of depression. And this can be further exacerbated by the role of being the eldest daughter in a Mexican-American family. So here, third-generation Mexican-American woman discussing masking her depression. She says, I'm the oldest in my family, so I have to put on that mask. I'm the one everyone relies on, so I feel like I don't ever have time to be sad and depressed. So here, due to her familial role, she decides to mask her depression to be able to fill that role. Here we see the cultural value of familism and respect. aspect, as we were noticing the impact of family roles and obligations, we noticed that there was a strong cultural value of familism and respect. These values discussed are consistent with research amongst Mexican Americans. These are cultural values that are prevalent in Mexican Americans, where familism is holding a strong emphasis on your family and family obligations, and respect is respecting your elders and parents even if you disagree with them. So maintaining this family respect is what makes the views of parents and elders on mental health hard to go against due to a desire and emphasis of holding up the views of the elders and the family, as I mentioned in the negative stigma slide. So here we see a first-gen Mexican American woman talking about respecting her father's thoughts on mental health. She says, I still appreciate what he has to say, even if it's hurtful, I still respect him because he's my dad. So here we see her holding up these views of familism and respecting his role as her father in the Mexican American family. So moving back into the general factors that contribute to mental health, we are going to move now into the positive influences, so the flip side. So here we see reducing mental health stigma, encouraging mental health, promoting resources, and validating experiences. So reducing mental health stigma emerged as a theme when participants shared that there was a stronger emphasis in trying to reduce stigma in our community by openly talking about ways to treat mental health, such as medication and therapy. So, for example, a Mexican American woman discussing medication for depression with a friend. She said one of her friends showed her how medication has helped him, and he talks about trying it. If you don't like it, that's okay. But he made her more open-minded because medication was something that was scary to her. Because of that stigma that often comes with treating depression, and there's often stigma around, therapy and medication to treat mental health disorders. And so, just opening up and talking about it with your friends can often help reduce that stigma. And then encouraging mental health. Here we have a Mexican American woman talking about opening doors in her family. In the discussion, she talks about her cousin who has experienced symptoms of mental health disorders such as depression. She said, no one knew until I talked about my depression. And after I did, she was like, okay, maybe I need help. So there she opened the door and kind of opened the floor for discussion about depression. So, maybe if she didn't first open up about her own depression, her cousin wouldn't have been able to discuss it within the family as well. Here we have the promotion of resources. A Mexican American woman discusses social media and the promotion of mental health resources. She says, our generation and social media, there's this influence of being accepting. And she says, we're going to provide resources like growing up in a school setting. So often the younger generation is more adept to using social media to provide resources for mental health and are just more open to providing resources to the people that may need them or pointing people in the right direction. So here, validating experience had other sub-themes, such as mental health discussion, feeling less taboo, support from family, and validation for people who have also struggled with mental health. But for time's sake, we will only examine the role of support for family. So here we have a Mexican American woman who's a third generation, and she discusses depression with her mom, and it's important to note that her mom has also experienced depression. She says, something that helps me is talking with my mom in my therapy sessions with her, using us to talk to about it, and honestly, I trust her. So here she feels validated discussing depression with her mom, who has also gone through similar experiences as her. So for the main discussion and takeaways from my research, I do note that there is a stigma for the general population in terms of mental health that is just present in our society. But for main factors that relate to Mexican American women, mental health stigma from the family may possibly exacerbate symptoms of depression or other mental illnesses due again to the strong value of family within the culture. There's the duality of family, which I will discuss in a later slide. And something we noticed through the research is the generation of immigrants can be pretty impactful in terms of mental health. There's a pattern that the later generations tend to have less stigma and are more open to discussing mental health and are more likely to break those cycles of stigma and taboo. Some limitations for the study. Fortunately, had a small sample size. There was only 5 participants that I was able to interview, and And of those 5 participants, the majority were third-generation immigrants. So I had less views from first and second-generation immigrants, as well as just general time constraints. So it's important to note the clinical implications of this research. A main goal of the project is to inform the clinical work as they may work with Mexican American women struggling with depression. It's important to note that in mainstream psychology, there tends to be a deficit approach to examining cultural values. So we need to be careful about not framing one's culture as a negative, but being able to hold that both at times it can be harmful, but also as a strength. For example, Stein and colleagues discussed the duality of cultural values being strengths and burdens, where the values that we hold are cultural strengths and contribute to our resilience as Mexican people, but it also may negatively impact us if we don't always agree with them. So it is important for clinicians to be able to recognize this nuance within their Mexican American clients. And yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you, especially to my participants. Without them, this project wouldn't have been possible. I just really appreciated them being so open and honest, especially when it comes to discussing mental health. As I mentioned, it can be really taboo and like a lot of stigma surrounding it. So just being really open and honest about their experiences, especially with a stranger, it was just, I really appreciated the candor from them, and also my family and my friends just for being so supportive all the time. You know, just being that kind of beacon of light within her life. Especially thank you to my advisor, Dr. Melissa Bless, for just her constant wisdom and insight. I also don't know where I would have been without her, because she's so smart and awesome. Thank you.
So excellent. Thank you very much for sharing that research. Incredibly important research. We have time for some questions or comments. Would you like to start? Katie.
So that was awesome. I was curious if your participants talked at all, or if it came up for them, like how they coped with depression, because I was really struck by the quote about the participant who said she talked to her mom, and it made me kind of think about like a strengths-based cultural approach, right? That like, I think mainstream, we often think of medication and therapy and not to knock either of those, which I think can be incredibly important. But I was wondering if you saw like some specific themes, family-based or otherwise, for how your participants coped.
I definitely asked about like general like self-help, just processes. A lot of people mentioned like journaling, also just like exercising, but that participant in general was really interesting. She talked about how her family tends to approach things in like a very homeopathic way. So her mom kind of introduced her to like using essential oils as like a sort of grounding method. So you know, she's like, you know, like a little like out of her body, like maybe using a certain essential oil to ground herself and come back to earth a little bit, and also just being able to discuss depression with her mom is also just sort of like a self-help way. So I thought it was really interesting too, and just her general closeness with her mom was like super cool and awesome. Yes?
So I know you had like a pretty small set aside of your limitations, and if you were able to sort of expand that and continue to study with more students of different backgrounds, would you also consider the implications of maybe Mexican Americans who are of like mixed race and have that sort of background and experience, and how that might differ from people who are from a fully Mexican family?
Yeah, that would definitely be super interesting, and a lot of the participants were of like different backgrounds. Just I guess for time's sake, it was not like possible to dive totally into like the racial and ethnic kind of implications of things. I kind of just focused on general like personal identity, because some people were like from Mexico, some people were like it's been a while since my family came to Mexico, so it would definitely be interesting to further expand on maybe like those, like how like an ethnic identity or racial identity could affect like depression and just general mental health outcomes. So I would definitely be interested in doing something like that if I have more time.
Other questions or comments from the crowd? All right.
Sofia when she was taking my chemical dependency class, and she struck me as very bright, very motivated. And when she talked about wanting to do this project, we had a shared cultural identity, and so I said, let's go for it. It's going to be, I know it's going to be hard, but it's going to be definitely rewarding. And it was a privilege to get to work with you, so proud of you. There was a rush to get there to the finish line, but you got there. I told you trust the process, and you made it. So congratulations.